Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. Sometimes I spend so much time in these high Rocky Mountain ghost towns that I start to sort of hear ravens' voices as if they were human voices talking to me. And it gets me thinking about how other languages sound to the ear and what a multiplicity of languages the Vikings themselves must have encountered during the Viking Age, roughly 800 to 1100, in Europe and adjoining lands. And since a lot of people ask about this, either because they're working on fiction or on a game or just out of personal curiosity, I thought I would spend a video addressing the question of what languages were spoken where during the Viking Age. Well, let's start in Scandinavia itself. Old Norse was divided into a Western dialect area and an Eastern dialect area, West Norse and East Norse. West Norse were the dialects of Norway and its colonies overseas to the west, so Norwegian colonies in Ireland, in the Hebrides, in Shetland and Orkney, in Iceland, in the Faroes, and in Greenland would have spoken West Norse. East Norse, on the other hand, was the language of Sweden, Denmark, and Gotland, which already probably had a rather distinctive dialect. The differences between West Norse and East Norse at this time would not have been significant. They would have been noticeable, but probably not much above the level of accent. One of the most noticeable differences would have been the different forms of the word for I being ek in West Norse, which we see, of course, in almost all of our Norse literature since it's written in Iceland, but then jak in East Norse, which of course is the origin of Swedish ja, Danish jeg, etc. Now, closely related to Old Norse would be the Old English spoken in England. This, of course, was also divided into many different dialectical areas. It's particularly pretty easy to pinpoint Northern versus Southern Old English. Northern Old English having more commonalities with Old Norse, perhaps reflecting an origin further north in Jutland, where the Angles had immigrated from. And the amount of mutual intelligibility between Old Norse and Old English is something I've addressed in a previous video, one that's pretty old, so I'll probably remake it eventually. In general, I think that it's not so much a matter that they were instantly mutually intelligible as that you could pick out a lot of words and you could pretty quickly learn to understand the other language. You'd be on a 75% step up, but you could still probably engineer your speaking of Old English or Old Norse to be harder for the opposite language speaker to understand. I think it's a little bit more like, say, a Spanish and Italian situation than it is like a, say, Swedish and Norwegian situation, to use modern analogies. Still very close, but still an untrained speaker might have a little bit of trouble understanding. Now, the closest language to Old English is, of course, Old Frisian, spoken on the islands off the coast of the Netherlands and Denmark and northern Germany. This language actually is probably a little bit more mutually intelligible to Old Norse than Old English itself, just based on various random sound changes Old English had undergone. And then, of course, you have Old Saxon, which is not the same as Anglo-Saxon, i.e. Old English, spoken in northern Germany. This also would have been very closely mutually intelligible with Old Norse, probably along the same lines as Old English. And, of course, at the end of the Old Norse language period, starting in the late Middle Ages, you get a lot of Middle Low German, Middle Saxon, if you will, influence on Old Norse. And then stretching from parts of eastern France through Switzerland and central and southern Germany, through Austria and probably into areas of what's now the Czech Republic, you would have had Old High German dialects. And that would not be closely mutually intelligible with Old Norse or the other existing Germanic languages at the time because of the Old High German sound shift. Now, some Gothic would still remain in the Crimea, based on the fact that we do have, thanks to a discovery actually from 2015 by some Russian scholars, we have some Gothic inscriptions, documents from the 800s, 900s in the Crimea, and then of course Busbek in the 1500s recorded Gothic words in the Crimea. So there would have still been some Gothic there, but I think it's pretty unlikely that many Norse people ever encountered Crimean Goths. In the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire, Greek was the dominant language. This would have been medieval Greek, not identical to classical Greek, but broadly familiar to students of Greek. Of course, the Romance languages would have been developing: Italian or Italian dialects in Italy, Sardinian in Sardinia, Romanian wherever the hell it actually was at this point, Spanish Portuguese, Galician dialects in Iberia, although in competition with Andalusian Arabic, right? The Arabic spoken by the Islamic rulers of Spain at this time. And then French and Provençal dialects in France. The Romance dialects would not have been anywhere near standardized at this point, and you'd probably have a lot of regional variation, probably even more so than today. Then you would have Basque spoken in about the same places as today, along the Pyrenees, the border between France and Spain. You would expect the Slavic languages to be spoken in a wide area of Eastern Europe, although they would probably not be as differentiated as today. You could probably differentiate East Slavic, so Proto-Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian from West Slavic, Czech, Polish, Sorbian, etc. from South Slavic, Bulgarian, Macedonian, Serbo-Croatian, Slovene, etc. And then Hungarian would be a relatively new incomer with the Magyar invasions. So that would be present in Eastern Europe as well. And then the precursors of Lithuanian and Latvian along the Baltic coast, the precursor of Finnish in Finland, and of the Sami dialects in Sapmi, the northern reaches of the Scandinavian peninsula, and Finland. What else might they encounter? Over in the British Isles, Old Irish would be spoken in Ireland and would be making inroads into western Scotland and the Hebrides, where it would ultimately give rise to Scottish Gaelic. You would also have in Scotland possibly remnants of Pictish, whatever that was. It might actually be multiple things. It might be a non-Indo-European speech as well as a Brittonic speech. We might have two things that are really Pictish. There'd probably still be some Brittonic speech, i.e. Something like Cumbrian or Welsh in parts of southwestern Scotland, maybe. And then in southeastern Scotland, you would have Old English pretty well established. And then, of course, in Wales, you would have Old Welsh, and in Cornwall, Cornish, a related Celtic language. And just across the sea in Brittany and far northwestern France, you would have Breton, a Celtic language brought by migration from the British Isles after the Anglo-Saxon invasion of the British Isles. In Greenland, we can presume that the Norse would have encountered something ancestral to Inuktitut, and then, of course, who knows what they'd be encountering in Newfoundland, i.e. Vinland. Presumably some Algonquian language, but the specific tribe or tribes they encountered is, of course, pretty much impossible to determine. In the Middle East, there would, of course, be dialects of Arabic spoken widely, and presumably some Norse speakers might have encountered speakers of Aramaic, and then speakers of Turkic languages in areas of the steppe that are now parts of present-day Ukraine and Russia, and possibly Iranian languages along the steppe region and in the Caucasus and the Caspian too, and perhaps many other languages that are difficult to anticipate from this remove in time. But I hope this gives you some general idea of the kaleidoscope of languages spoken in, well, the Old World and a little bit of the New during the time that the Vikings were sailing around. I would also point out that there might be some class stratification in terms of language in Norse settlements themselves, as since most slaves would be of either Celtic or Slavic descent, depending on how far west or east you are, you would expect that probably some Norse speakers did have some awareness of a Celtic and or Slavic language. So there could have been some interplay there, possibly even with Norse settlements in places like Iceland or in northwestern England where there were a lot of Celtic slaves. You might find a Norse-dominated settlement that was actually predominantly Celtic-speaking, probably Old Irish. So that's an interesting thought that I think is sort of underrepresented in fictional imaginations of the Viking Age. I make these videos in beautiful places for free because I don't think that knowledge needs to be locked up in an ivory tower, and I think that the internet needs a dose of good, up-to-date knowledge about Old Norse and not just the same public domain and Wikipedia stuff. So if you enjoy and like what I'm doing, I hope you'll support my Patreon page as well as check out my translations of the Poetic Edda, the Saga of the Volsungs, and forthcoming, the Saga of Hervor and Haedrek with the Saga of Rolf Kraki. For now, from beautiful Wyoming, where the ravens are calling amid the ruins of the past, I'm wishing you all the best.